Today we're talking about installing long tube headers on your C7 Corvette, so stick around. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and we've got the long tube headers from Koch's installed on our C7 Z06. Now, we're not going to go through the process where I show you all the crap of installing headers. Everybody, I mean, it's about as straightforward as everything. And I'll be honest with you, out of all the header installs I've done, this has been the easiest, but there are some tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you if you are a C7 Corvette owner and you're thinking about doing this process yourself. That's going to save you a lot of headaches. But first, maybe we should do a cold start, see how it sounds. Not bad. And the set that I went with was the one with the 2-inch primaries and the full cross pipe all the way back to the factory mufflers with the green cats on there. And so essentially you're getting rid of the front catalytic converters, keeping the rear catalytic converters in there, and you're running cat extensions, which all that stuff comes with the Koch setup, makes life real easy. And as I said, this has been the easiest installation of long tube headers that I've ever done. But there are a couple of tips for the C7 that's going to make this a lot easier. First and foremost, like anything, get the car up in the air, get your PB blaster out there and hit all of your bolts, hit all of your slip joints, everything that you're going to be taking apart the day before. Give it some time to soak in and it'll make your life 1,000 times easier, specifically on the factory header to downpipe where the front cat section is. Those studs were the worst. And in fact, it wasn't bad on this setup because I'd already replaced those with cat delete downpipes, and whenever I went back in, I used bolts with anti-seize on them. They came right out, but getting those out the first time, I spent more time just getting the front cats out than I did doing the entire long tube installation on this. So let's look underneath the hood and talk about a couple things there. In order to make your life easier whenever you're working underneath the hood, go ahead and do a couple simple things. Take your valve covers and your coil packs off. That will give you even more room to get into the factory manifold bolts, get the coil plugs out of the way. But what I like to do is leave the old spark plugs in there. I only had to remove one, and that was the number 4. I left the other 7 in there. And whenever I got the factory headers out, I was able to get the new long tubes up, set them up on top of the spark plugs so I could get back on top of the car, reach in and use it to align everything. It's a lot easier to do that than try to fight it, get it kind of propped up in place and figure out how you're going to be able to hold it and get a bolt started. Remember, you're going into aluminum. You don't want to start a bolt sideways on these heads, and double check the torque for the heads on these things because it's really low. It's real easy to strip out header bolts on these things. Then you're going to be helicoiling and it's going to be a pain to get in there and do it on this platform. On top of the valve covers and coils, you're going to have to remove the fuse box on the passenger side. The cover comes off. There's 2 handles that you'll pop up and then you'll rotate back out and the whole fuse box will come off. You will have 5 connectors underneath there. Go ahead and disconnect those connectors from the fuse box base, and then there's 3 bolts that allow you to pull that out of the way, and it gives you a ton more room to get into the bolts on the passenger side and the spark plugs. And in fact, I believe in the service manual, just for changing the spark plugs, it's going to go ahead and tell you to take that out as part of the process. Just remember to unhook your battery in the back first because there is a power lug that you have to hit on the end of the spark plug box before you do that. Next, we're moving to underneath the car. You're going to have the big shield plate underneath there. There's 2 bolts that you leave in there. You'll see the slots, the rest you drop out, and it allows you to slide the shield plate out. It keeps it from dropping your face, makes everything nice and easy. While you're at it, go ahead and take the front wheels off. You're going to want to get those out of the way because there's a couple of the downpipe bolts that you're going to need to get to. And the easiest way is through the wheel well. You'll see those whenever you get in there and start looking exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of them, for the most part, I could get to with an impact, an electric impact, you know, a high torque one, and get those broken loose. and drop those out. Now there is a cross beam that's just an aluminum cross beam, at least on the Z06, that connects the frame to the subframe. On the passenger side, you'll want to go ahead and remove that. The driver side did not have the issue. Also, if you have a Z06 or a dry sump, go ahead and drain the oil out of the system, because you're going to have to remove the tank lines that go over to the bottom of the engine pan on the dry sump. You'll see what I'm talking about on the passenger side whenever you go to remove things or put things back in. In fact, I was able to get everything out with those in place, but getting the long tube headers back in place, that became the issue, and I had to remove those lines, or at least unbolt them from the engine pan, move them out of the way, set the headers up in there, and then I could bolt those back up. The rest of the exhaust going back, once you get the tray out of the way, is very straightforward and clear, easy to get to. The connectors on your O2 sensors are going to be a little bit of a pain. Don't drop out the exhaust pieces too far that have the O2 sensors in until you can reach up there and unclip it. Whenever you go back in with parts, make sure and go ahead and plug those in before you get the parts up in there, because some of them you're going to have a hard time getting your hands in around the piping in order to plug those things in. As far as the rest of the piping, I didn't have any issues until I got back to the factory mufflers, to the factory X pipe, and all I did there was, once the clamps were loosened up, I hit them with a torch, just a standard little propane torch, heated them up, and then started tapping on the brackets that are actually welded to the X pipe, and eventually it came off no problem. You'll want to clean that up with some emery cloth or something like that before you put the new slip pipes on for the aftermarket or your long tube header set. So that will have gotten most of the exhausting out of the way. You've gotten the front cats out of the way. The top manifolds are easy to get to, but there's 3 bolts on each header manifold for the heat shield. Go ahead and take those bolts out. I wouldn't worry so much about trying to get the heat shield out of there, because it's a very tight fit on both sides while the header and the heat shield's in there. But you'll notice, if once you get the heat shield and the header unbolted, that you can actually drop the header out the bottom and push the heat shield up, and then pull the heat shield out the top, and the headers will come straight out the bottom and clear everything. No reason to take the starter out, no reason to unbolt the motor mounts and lift the motor up. Once you've got those oil lines off, everything's nice, clear, easy, especially because once you see the size of the cats that come out of the front, there's a lot of room in there to manipulate everything. So with the factory headers out, let's go ahead, hang the new long tubes in there, and as I said, run them up in there, set them gently on top of the old spark plugs, come on the top side, and then go ahead and get your bolts started. With your gasket in there, get all of your bolts started, tightened down. Both sides are going to be exactly the same. And then we're going to look at the underneath section, and the way the pipes are set up for at least the Cook's long tubes are, you want to start back at the muffler and start building the pipes out forward. There's actually 3 different sections of pipes. So you're going to have the rear connector, and then the X pipe, and then the front connectors. And you want to start with the ones that go to the mufflers, then add the next section, then add the next section. Double check the orientation of your clamps that you're using though, because they may be bolts out on the rear ones and then bolts in on the middle ones, etc. Don't really get everything tightened down too much before you make sure that you can rotate them out of the way, and remember to have clearance for your underbelly skid plate whenever all is said and done. But you don't want to tighten everything up until you kind of get your exhaust tips lined back out. You may have to get underneath there with a rubber mallet, bang some things around to kind of get things loosened up and where they want to be, and then you can start tightening things down. But once you have the entire section in place, it's easy enough to push it back and get the ball joints into the long tube headers. Just make sure that you put the clamps on before you do that. Now that you've got your long tubes in there and you've got all the exhaust piping done, it's a great time to go ahead and replace your spark plugs. You have a lot more room with the long tubes in there to easily get to your spark plugs, get them pulled out, put them back in. Put the plug wires back on before you put the coils in. You want all the room to be able to get your hands in there and easily manipulate the plug wire boots on, and then you can go ahead and put your coil packs back on there and get everything hooked back up. Everything comes out nice and simple. Just move it back or forward if you're having issues with things like the valve covers getting in the way. Lift them up, slide them back. There may be more room this direction than this direction. That allows you to tilt everything out. But for the most part, there was no interference on any of these parts that I had to really worry about moving it around a lot of directions. Most of them, like the exhaust headers, if it would not come this way, if I just went forward and then tipped it a little bit, then you could twist it and the whole thing would just come out. So you're not going to have to fight much on these. Everything's just going to kind of slip into place nice and easily. Last but not least, don't forget to top off your oil, refill it back in. Since you've unhooked those lines, or if you had to unhook those lines, the last thing you want to do is forget small maintenance items like that. But whenever it's all said and done, you've got new long tube headers, new spark plugs, and a new oil change on here. Throw the thing back down on the ground, fire it up, get it out of the garage quick because it's going to smell bad for a little while as you're burning in this new stainless steel, and then go out and have some fun. So, what's my review on the Cook's long tube headers? Surprisingly, they're actually quieter than my setup was with the front cat delete downpipes on there. So apparently I don't know the resonance, or if just the makeup of the green cats is more dense than the ones that are in the factory cans. I'm not sure, but very good, quiet sound, even in sport mode. Whenever you're below, say, 2,000 RPMs, once you get above that and start opening the throttle up, it wails to all hell and back. But the big thing for me is once you flip it over to touring mode, everything quiets down just like it should. And you can actually drive this thing on the highway with zero drone and still get that amazing power and sound that you're looking for whenever you open it up. So hopefully this quick video will help anybody with some clarification before they dive into doing a header install on a C7 Corvette. It is very straightforward, but just a couple of these small tricks will really save you a lot of headaches when going through this process. And I was able to knock out this entire project in about 6 hours. As I said, this is the quickest that I've ever had a long tube header installation go. Even on my C6, it took at least twice as long. Everything really fits well on these Cook's headers. I can't speak to any other company or brand as far as that goes, but these things fit amazing. The clearance is great all the way back. No rattles afterwards, no exhaust leaks. Very, very happy for it. And make sure and keep your eyes peeled because we are going to get into the tuning. Now that we have a cold air intake and long tube headers on here, we're definitely to that point where the Z06 are going to need tuned. So stick around for that. But you guys know the drill. Thanks for stopping by the garage. Remember, ABT, always be tuning.